Red?
I have it's called
Mood lighting?
Heartbeat, and
Oh.
you can choose the speed, but we're live on Fraud Pod, guys and gals,
Oh, are
and
we talking Fraud Pod today?
yeah, I mean, isn't all of the Trump administration Fraud Pod? Basically, is
No.
what people would think.
I don't sit and characterize administrations. I characterize issues.
What's the issues? There's been a lot. So
There have been a
you
lot.
want to start with this new? Have you watched? First of all, have you watched the Megyn Kelly interview with the FDA head,
No.
Makary?
I heard about it, Makary, but no, I have
Makary. So I
I have
have
no
his
idea what's
book.
the name. That's how I'm pronouncing it.
I have his book in the queue on Audible because he
Okay.
wrote a book apparently. So I'm gonna come
Yeah,
out
he did.
with a book review. Have you read it or? Okay. So they basically 3 key points came out of that
You
thing.
said you haven't read it either.
No, I haven't read it. 3 key points came out of the Megyn Kelly interview.
Oh, got it. Okay.
I do recommend everyone watch it. It's an hour long. However you feel about Megyn Kelly or how do you pronounce it? Makary?
Sure, why not? It's not like I know him, so sure.
Okay. I asked him to get on the pod too, but he hasn't replied back.
Okay.
He hasn't replied. Do you think he will?
Well, if he wants to talk to people in clinical research, he should.
We can go live and do a fraud pod with him.
Yeah, if he wants to do a fraud pod, I'm down to hear from him.
So basically, I have 3 key takeaways from that interview, but to summarize most of it, the F in the FDA is fucked, guys.
Says fuck drug administration. Is that what you're saying?
The F is the food industry is going to get a lot of overhaul, and there's already a lot of action there. But for us in life sciences, so as early as April, which is now, April's almost over, aims to accelerate drug approvals by reducing the current 10-year timeline, emphasizing faster access to cures through one randomized controlled trial, followed by intense post-marketing surveillance using electronic health record data, particularly for rare diseases, which may only need a plausible mechanism of condition for approval. And there's 2 more points, but do you want to speak on this one a little?
So, first of all, I think when it comes down to use of EHR data, the first question is, have people consented to that use? You can't do retroactive consent. So you can't just go, I'm going to use EHR data. They never consented to it. So if you're going to set up studies going forward, fine, get the right consent, go ahead and do it. The next question is, how do you get past? You're still trying to treat people, and you can have off-label uses. That's fine, but my concern is when you have new products being introduced without sufficient evidence, especially in rare diseases. I'm all for speed. I'm all for getting something out there, but I don't know if real-world evidence as a standalone is enough to give you data. Your friend is back.
Oh no, he's your friend. It's on your channel.
Oh, we're not putting him up.
We won't put him up, but that's your direct on watching on your platform.
I don't know who that is.
Yes, no one does. He's anonymous, or she. Who knows?
Well, they followed you, right? So they're your friend.
Yeah, but they're clearly still on your channel. So they got really cozy with you.
But anyway, so the point I was making was, I think from a EHR perspective, I think you need data that is clean, and without a randomized double-blinded study, you're simply not going to get it.
Yeah, of course.
But
that's the argument, is that's the old paradigm, and the new paradigm is, let's, at least for rare disease, let's try this faster, because the old paradigm hasn't really produced anything.
So to Helen's point, there will often be one small study. I'm not sure it's one small study. I guess small is big depending on how rare the disease is. Subjective. But yeah, it's one study. It's usually one study to the extent you can. So I'm not sure how much savings he's going to get. The problem is you just don't have enough people to start off with.
Yeah, and I thought about that EHR thing too. Like, actually, even before I knew who Makary was.
Yeah.
I know some of the CROs were trying to back end some studies using EHR data.
They've been talking about that. I did a talk about it in like 2017.
Yeah, I remember like I was at DIA in 2018 or 2019, and the CRO was there with a booth talking about, we pay your doctor, $5,000 to do a trial, and then I asked the details. It's basically let us mine your EHR in perpetuity. Great deal. Great deal.
Question is, who's the us here? Sponsor?
It was a startup, but it was funded by a big CRO.
The problem is, who's going to agree to something like that? It's stupid. First of all, how do you get that consent?
Well, who needs agreement? Like you said. I mean,
yeah, but you're kind of get that from every patient out there, because all of their I wouldn't agree to something like that.
I wonder if there's a loophole in the EHR that says as long as this data is anonymized, you can use it in aggregate, like in a
you generally can. That because it's not subject to HIPAA, but you might still have FTC rules.
She said, yeah, it is. It did some work from Moderna and rare diseases, and by small, I mean less than 50 participants.
I don't know what the it is. I don't know what the it refers to here.
Let's just say she's agreeing with me, hopefully.
Sure, I'm sure she is.
Second point.
Yeah.
Makary proposes replacing animal testing with alternatives like organ on a chip.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, predictive in vitro modeling and AI aligning with the FDA Modernization Act 2.0, which also addresses chronic disease by eliminating harmful food additives like petrochemical dyes, microplastics, seed oils, reflecting concerns supported by sources like Children's Health Defense.
So my issue with that is, first of all, let's stop throwing the word AI around, because everyone thinks AI solves everything. I like AI. I'm a fan of AI. You and I have talked about AI a lot. Yeah. But the truth is, AI is not ready for any of this. Let's stop pretending that it is. AI will be ready at some point, but we're not even close. So until we get that ready, let's stop hyping it up to the extent we are. Then the question becomes, if AI is not it, do we use things like organ on a chip? Now, if you're talking organ on a chip, I think the technology is, again, like AI, not there yet. It may eventually get there. We're using a lot of it already. I think I've seen data that says something like 97% of all products, like pharmaceuticals, go through like organ on a chip type of technology. So the fact is that it's not the fact that the data doesn't exist. It's that it's not good enough to replace. So while I'm a huge fan, exactly to Helen's point, I'd love to be able to see animal studies being eliminated, because I have a dog. You have dogs. I don't want to hurt dogs if I can help it. But if the alternative is hurt dogs or hurt humans, can we find a different alternative?
I think you and Service Doug are useless would agree on that one. Sorry, I had to give them.
Stop, you can't feed the trolls.
There you go, troll. Eat up.
So then I think you spoke to petrochemicals and seeds.
Seed oils, yeah.
So I don't know enough about seed oil to be able to comment. Petrochemicals are basically plastic. I mean, plastics are made out of petrochemicals, but I don't know the point he's making there. But yeah.
There's one of my PIs. Well, he's a sub-I. He hasn't been a PI yet, but he has his own podcast. I think I sent it to you. He's always discusses seed oils and the food industry, and he goes really deep. We've been posting some of it on our UMA clinical trials page, but there are very well-educated people who would agree with Makary here, and RFK is, I think, on the same boat when it comes to these.
I'm not sure I'm using RFK as the standard here. Makary,
standard. I think he's just leading the initiative.
Yeah, that doesn't make him any more qualified to do it. me, Makary, you know what? I can respect that. You went through school. You have an opinion. You have more access to more data. I'd probably trust you a little bit more in like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, when you actually had time to play with the data. But I'm going to trust that MD behind your name a little bit more than another lawyer. And I say that as someone who is a lawyer. Nothing in law school taught me to deal with health data.
Right.
So
But you can have ancillary interest and be very well versed on those things.
No, you can't. There's a point at which that does not replace. That I
Well,
know
you would obviously know better than
you're
me.
talking about biohacking, and there are people who are biohackers, but biohackers are by and large people who actually have degrees in the stuff we're talking about.
Sure, but and you can explain this a little better.
Sure.
When you're an attorney,
Yeah.
and you have a case you're working on,
yeah,
I mean, you go in the weeds. Like you guys get
Dude,
very
I go into the
educated
weeds,
on
that
the
doesn't make me
topic.
qualified. That's why I still have expert witnesses.
But
who
if
actually
you've
talk
done
about
that for 30 years,
it. No,
it does make you a little more
No.
credible than the average Joe.
no. That's why they still hire.
No, I don't know, man. You attorneys work very hard on your cases.
You're talking to an attorney.
I know. That's why I said you.
No, and I'm telling you, no, it does not qualify me any further. I know how to frame an argument. If I had to frame an argument, I'd go to RFK every day,
Sure.
and I'm not going to Makary for that.
Sure.
But that does not qualify him to talk about. He probably is a really good environmental attorney. I don't know anything more about his experience there.
Toxins and
Sure, but I don't even know what that means, right? I know the word toxin, but the word toxin is a bullshit word. I don't really know what it means here.
something about chemicals being dumped in the water and it causes estrogen.
See, that's what I mean. Like that sort of bullshit talk up there. Like specifically, what's happening?
Well, I mean, it sounds bullshit, but there's people that actually studied it and they co-sign it.
Then let that person talk.
Sure.
Without a doubt, if that person.
But they don't have the platform. Like on X, they don't have the voice that like RFK has. Or
yeah, and that's my point.
Yeah,
and you're making the point for me. RFK shouldn't have the voice on that topic. There are people who do because they spend their life studying that.
Mm-hmm.
And
fair enough. But I mean, they're recluses. They don't get out there.
It's like people who talk about service dogs for no apparent reason.
Man, you're feeding the dude. I'm assuming it's a dude, but maybe not. To restore a third one, to restore public trust, Makary plans to limit conflicts of interest. This one,
that one I actually agreed with.
Yeah, you had a nice post on that. I even commented, "I'm proud of you."
I saw that.
To restore public trust, Makary plans to limit conflicts of interest by replacing pharma representatives with patient and family reps on advisory committees, a response to historical FDA industry ties like those seen with OxyContin's approval, while maintaining scientific staff but cutting communication, lobbying, and outdated IT roles. And one thing he did say in this interview, this is why I like these 1 hour long things. No FDA reviewers have been cut. If they resign on their own. None have been cut.
I'm sorry, really? Really?
Yep.
Dude.
That's what he said. Who am I going to trust? You or the source himself?
I will trust the guy whose boss does not hire Doge to fire entire departments.
They said no reviewers were fired.
Do you want me to find a bunch of reviewers who said that they were fired? Who would you trust? The guy who was the guy who was fired?
Nobody, man. Gotta trust ourselves in this one.
How do you trust yourself when you have neither the information nor the experience nor the expertise?
That's a joke. The situation's so screwed up that all you got is your gut.
That's my point.
You got your gut and your brain. They're slightly
and I would trust, if I had a vest, who do you trust? The guy with the vested interest or the guy who doesn't?
Yeah.
Exactly. Pull up Helen's comment.
Not what I'm hearing from former FDA
employees.
But the reviewers, the people making the decision on which drugs
you already have delays.
Huh?
You already have delays.
No, the reviewers.
Yeah,
he said on that interview, the reviewers, like no reviewers have been. We're not making cuts in those areas. We're making cuts where the bloat is. Administrative IT, outdated IT, to that regard. I'm sure you could find some outlying cases.
You keep saying outlying.
Well, if the guy himself, the head, says that's not the intention, you got to believe him, no?
Well, that's not the intention, but here's a.
But the intention is what leads actions. Like there might be some.
Here's the post. Just click on it.
Hold on. You put it on the chat.
Oh, there we go. Click on
This
it.
is for everyone else who wants to take score at
Do
home.
you want me to pull it up? Is that best? Give me a second. I need to
Sure. Darshan will pull it up right now. Thank you guys for watching, listening. Make sure you follow him. We need to get Darshan to, what's a good goal, stretch goal for you? 20,000 followers on LinkedIn by the end of this year.
There you
We
go.
can do it. Let's make Cool Carney great again.
Again. When was that? When did I stop?
You've always been great, man. You're the OG.
We are the OG. Hold on.
You, Joe, Craig, the other Joe. Who else am I missing?
Probably another Joe, just because you have a lot of Joes.
Yeah, there's a lot of Joes. There's only one Darshan.
Is that my screen?
There we go. FDA cuts threaten new drugs as reviewers saddled with extra jobs. This is from Bloomberg.com.
Yeah.
Threaten new drugs as reviewers are saddled with extra jobs. So far, Makary, or however you say his name, seems correct. Even the fear porn headlines can't say reviewers are getting cut. They could have put it in there if they would have. Trust me, these fear porn people, they want clicks.
So wait, when is it not? When are facts not fear porn?
When they're factual.
How is this not? Why do you think it's not?
So
factual?
here's the state of new media.
Okay.
The source, whoever is the source, whether it's Musk, Makary in this case, RFK, they're willing to go on long, unscripted interviews, right? Pods.
Sure.
You take what they say there, then you cross-check it with this kind of shit. Bloomberg, all right, or traditional media, and you see what he said. Do they directly deny it? If they could, they'd put it right in the headline. In fact, they are confirming that the reviewers are saddled with more work. It confirms what Makary said on that pod. Former FDA chief calls job cuts haphazard, poorly. Yeah, well, that's true. That's his opinion.
Let's see.
So far, we haven't found a shred of evidence.
No, we're saying that we're basically making the jobs unsustainable, and then saying you can't blame us if they quit.
But the point,
it's like a bullshit thing.
Well, okay, but I covered my bases. I covered my bases when I said what I said. That's it.
Is it though? Is it though?
But this workflow, this thought process of how you're forced, all of us now, to get our info, I think is really the way to go. You got to do long form, and then you got to fact check it with like.
Why is it my job to now fact check?
Because you're a citizen in this environment, man. I mean,
there's literally an entire department called the FDA that does that.
Right, but we're fact checking the stories about the FDA. Talk about some like recursion.
No, but my point is, we're looking for someone to look at these applications. We're looking for someone to say that that's my job to do that. When you are
right, the reviewers,
people.
Right. What I'm saying is like a level above that. It's how do you know what's true and what's not? With everything's fear porn sensationalized out there, you got to do the work these days, guys. You can't just sit back and listen to CNN.
Or you trust an agency whose entire job it was to do exactly that.
Yeah, but they're not a media organization.
It was working fine. It was being paid for by the industry to make sure that, and it's like paying at the DMV. It's not like you.
But and exactly what Helen says. This is my antidote. Okay, let's listen to the organization. I got a great person, Darshan. How about the head of it on a 1 hour long?
I would normally say that is totally fair, and even now I will say I will listen, but I don't believe you yet because you haven't been there.
Exactly, and then you cross-check his craziest statements.
I got a life to live.
I know, but you just tried with Exhibit A failed.
Wait,
right? It actually proved my point.
I feel like it proved my point because
my point was... Listen, look at that. No, not that one.
Okay,
the first one.
Crucial.
FDA cuts. So the question was, Makary said. So here's the thing. Makary said no reviewers' jobs were cut. This sensationalist headline.
Here's what they're cutting.
New drugs as reviewers saddled with extra jobs. Yes, that it confirms they were actually not cut, but they're maybe being forced to quit. That's a different story. That's different.
Is that different?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we didn't cut you. What we did was we told you got to do 14 people's jobs. I'm sorry, you did not get cut. I just want to be clear.
Yes. Well, we got derailed here. Listen, the point of all this is how I get my news, me personally, because like Helen said, we can't trust anything we hear anymore. Sadly, people trust me and you now to like bring them the distilled news. Me either. So we're just putting our own thought process out here. This is how I do it. I watch a long form. If I don't feel like watching it, I'll let AI summarize it. And then I'll cross-check his most controversial statements in there that sound crazy with facts. And then if they add up, they add up. If they are not congruent, then I got to consider him. Well, so far you said what if, but I haven't seen anything. Makary, man, I love you. Come on the pod. We'll have Darshan on too. You can ask him yourself, man.
I think that's always fair.
RFK pushes out top officials and health agency overhaul. Okay, but let's go back to this patient advocacy thing.
Okay.
That you mentioned.
Sure.
So that's the one thing you might agree with the new administration's.
Here's the thing. In the end, here's what it comes down to for me. I'm rooting for the country. I don't care who's in charge, as long as you're all trying to get the country ahead. Now, the definition of what brings the country ahead is the only part we disagree on. And that's okay. I don't have to agree with someone on everything.
Right.
There are different ways to get the country ahead. The question is, if in making the country go ahead, you're pushing it behind, we should be able to agree that the country's being pushed behind. My problem is we don't.
Right.
When the stock market drops 20-something%, we should universally agree that's pushing the country behind. Somehow, people disagree on that. I don't see how you get there. When you cut 20% of the FDA staff, we should agree that the country's worse off for it. When they were understaffed to begin with, somehow we don't. To me, that's what the concerns are.
I hear you. But I mean, the other side would say, well, they were understaffed in certain areas and overstaffed in others.
And what qualifies them to speak on that? Because I do this for a living. I've done this for a living.
Well, Makary is the one who says that. And
has he been
qualified.
in charge? How
he's
long
has
he been qualified?
He's the head of the FDA.
Agreed. For how long?
I don't know how long. Recently.
Like 2 days? 3 days?
Yeah, but you don't think he's qualified previously?
What qualifies him?
I don't know his background too much, but
I mean, he was a doctor.
He's a doctor. Johns Hopkins.
I don't know what kind of doctor he was. I respect the shit out of whatever he did. So who was the guy? Who was a surgeon the last go around with Trump?
Man, you and I did a pod back then on this.
Yeah, I think so.
2016 Trump. What does that mean for CRAs? I still remember the title.
Now that guy, he was probably the world. Like I understand, he was one of the world's best doctors.
Yes.
He
did like organ transplants.
Doctor.
He did like organ transplants.
A surgeon of some kind.
Yeah.
But I don't trust my doctor to talk about drug approvals. That doesn't qualify him in any way.
Well, not yours, but like this guy is a key opinion leader at least.
Why? Well, he will be in 6 months. He will be, without a doubt. He will be.
Fair enough. But so the overall point back to what you agree with them with the adcoms and the patient advisory.
So I think taking out bias is a good thing. I'm not gonna. I think I'm gonna bring this so I can see your face as opposed to looking the other way. So I think overall we agree that taking out bias is a good thing. Question is, and I like the fact that they actually is explicitly saying that if there's no other expert, then we'll consider doing exceptions. I can respect that. I'm not completely positive that saying that putting patient advocates in there to replace actual experts is the solution. I think you'd want patient advocates in there without a doubt. But I think that's a question of making the pie bigger, not eliminating people from the conversation.
Right. And advocacy groups, a lot of these companies, the one I'm invested in right now, for example, they go very heavily on the advocacy groups.
Absolutely.
And they utilize them. This is something I realized just recently. They lean on the advocacy groups to put pressure on the FDA.
Correct.
Which makes sense. Especially when you have something that's underserved or maybe
absolutely.
So there's definitely a place for them there, the advocacy groups. And then You can have the same argument, though. Ultimately, does the grift move there? The grift has been kind of kept out of that.
Oh, the
more or
grift's
less.
always been everywhere. The grift.
The
Again,
grift kind of goes. The grift is this spiritual thing that just kind of, I don't know. It's like a tyrannical force. Force instead of volunteerism.
I have no idea what you're going with that.
Another podcast. We'll save it for another one.
Fair enough.
Not necessarily he's a KOL. Oh, just because he's at Johns Hopkins doesn't mean he's a KOL.
Oh, is that what you're saying? I agree with that statement. Yeah, that's fair.
Sure. I never listen. Key opinion leader to me, as a very practical site owner, when we out enroll most KOLs on every study we do, doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. And that's my point with it.
If that's the metric that I use, but everyone's metric's different. Everyone values something different. I value, can you actually do what you say when you take on a study? Someone else may say, well, what's your education like? Somebody else may say, well, how many papers did you publish? So nobody can agree on what qualifies someone. Like if you had to distill what qualifies someone to its first principles to be in charge of a government agency, what would it be? Or what would those first principles be? Let's say for HHS, like RFK.
Yeah.
We know that you think he's not, but what is like first principle?
Yeah, that's a fair question to ask, right? So I would say someone who has experience and expertise. To me, those would be the two things you need.
But he has that.
How do you figure?
Well, he goes through all like 30 years he's spent doing, or more, 40 years.
Doing what?
Going through all the legal stuff he's been doing with clients. Mostly for environmental stuff.
Yeah, so exactly. So then how does that qualify him with either experience or expertise?
Maybe we should break the FDA between food and drugs because they're both very complicated.
But I'm not questioning that part of it. And there's a whole bunch of arguments we made that that's a good idea. But how does either of that qualify him for either food or drugs, though?
For the food side, it does. He understands the environmental toxins.
But again, environmental is what happens on the outside. It doesn't speak to food.
But their whole argument is that's what happens on the outside gets recycled into the food through chemicals, through the soil contamination.
You can't really tell me what's happening. That's what a toxicologist does. He's not qualified as a toxicologist. I'm not qualified as a toxicologist. Yeah. I'll shut up about it.
He could frame it, like you said.
Yeah, he can frame a great argument around it. I can frame a great argument around it. That doesn't mean I know what
I would pay to get RFK on the show with you. It'd be kind of hard to conduct that one, though.
Yeah, I don't think it doesn't matter who it is. I come from a place of, and I think we're having the right conversation, right? What qualifies someone? And I think it comes down to, do you know something more about the topic than someone who doesn't? And what qualifies you to know? I read some, what's the word? The like random book about it doesn't qualify you. It's like right now, you know more about philosophy than I do, without a doubt. Does that qualify you to now go
be a professor?
Philosophy? Yeah, exactly.
No.
And that's my point. Now, not just professor, shut down departments because
if I do this for 30 years, yeah, I would say yes.
That is exactly my point. If you did this for 30 years, read it, and you went and got a PhD,
lived it,
right? And that's
I don't think the PhD matters anymore, but I think the other stuff does.
But I think all of those come together. To me, the PhD is not the degree that matters; it's the demonstration that you spend the time to actually develop expertise.
Yeah, it's.
I think watching YouTube videos doesn't qualify you.
Hey, it might. I mean, for 30 years, geez, you come out on the other side of that.
No,
whole different person.
You'd show up a different person. I'm not sure if one's qualified to destroy like Harvard's freaking philosophy department.
All right, what about insurer pushback on this thing?
I don't know what that
So insurers may become the new gatekeepers under Makary's framework, refusing to cover drugs until post-market data proves efficacy. This is particularly relevant for rare disease therapies.
They already do that. But I'm confused about what he's suggesting here, because
no, he's not suggesting. The critics are saying this will empower insurers furthermore.
I don't know how that would work, because I mean, we actually already had that situation happen. There was a BMS drug, I want to say in multiple sclerosis. That's my best recollection. The FDA approved it as a under an expedited pathway, and CMS said that we won't pay for it. So effectively saying that the FDA approval doesn't matter. So to Helen's point, they already do refuse to cover them. I think generally speaking, they push back on that. But if it's FDA approved, it's a harder argument. But now if the FDA says this is going to be par for the course, it raises new questions and concerns.
Okay. 2 more potential fallouts from this. We got a glimpse into his mind on this hour-long podcast. I got to send it to you if you haven't seen it yet. His reforms may create disparities between U.S. and global regulatory standards, such as the EMA and other agencies. They may not adapt similar accelerated pathways.
Correct.
For example, the EMA often requires multiple RCTs and extensive preclinical data, which would conflict with this. Clinical trial sponsors. Standards.
Those are called ICH standards. Yeah.
Clinical trial sponsors conducting global trials will need to design protocols that satisfy both, potentially running parallel studies with different endpoints. Regulatory affairs teams will play a crucial role.
It would increase the cost of drugs and not decrease it, is the point.
You know what, though? I'm reading this and I'm thinking, well, it would make the U.S. the preferred destination.
It is already the preferred destination.
But it's been increasingly going out.
No, it hasn't. U.S. by far is the preferred destination. Like it's not even like close. If they had to choose between U.S. and like the rest of the world, they'd choose the U.S. That's how much it's preferred. Now there are reasons for that because we pay so much more.
So do you predict
preferred destination?
Well, let's do prediction market. Would you predict that? You know how your typical phase 3, let's say obesity with cardiovascular outcomes trial, that's a global study. There's 200 plus sites. Do you think now that's done mostly in U.S.?
Yeah. After
this, because the current skew, I would
it doesn't matter like whether it's before or after. Like yes. Now, once Trump comes out and says, because he's allegedly going to come out and say, we're going to price cap. If he does,
that's the next shoe to drop. Yeah.
Right. If he price caps, I think the whole world changes.
In what way?
The U.S. is the number one destination because they're saying that we generate most of the profits from most of the world.
Yeah.
The moment we say we're not going to do that, the U.S. does not become a primary destination anymore.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
We are the sickest, most overweight of the industrialized nations.
Here, it's a very simple dollar.
So we've been the best market for these drug companies.
Correct. So the moment we say we're not the best market, I think that changes.
The moment we say it's like rent control, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
In the real estate market and what happens in those markets. It's actually a good analogy.
It's not a bad analogy at all.
So what?
But, you have rent control in Europe already for the drug world and in Canada. If we also go into rent control, the question is, will people invest into real estate anymore at all? Would you? You bought real estate? If you were told this is the total amount of revenue you can charge.
I don't buy in rent control.
You don't? Okay, so let's assume that you did.
Yeah.
Would you buy real estate if someone told you this is the maximum amount of money you can charge? I don't care what your costs are.
I know. I'm saying no to. I wouldn't buy in a rent-controlled area.
Right, that's my point.
I've been in that situation and I turned it down.
Exactly, and I wouldn't either. And I think that's the point.
So the ones that do, though, they're like strategically aligned with each other. Like, hey, we're going to keep rates, and in a way, it's collusion.
Explain.
So you can have let's say 5 big corporations agree, hey, we're going to own rental properties in Inglewood, as an example, where there is. I turned down a deal in Inglewood. Because of this. So we're gonna just do it, us 5, and you're essentially creating like an oligarchy. Yeah.
But that's what we already have, right? Europe was that oligarchy in this context.
Right.
And they said,
which is actually a liberal, left-leaning policy, which Trump's gonna actually implement like a left-wing policy.
Yeah, it might be. But there are ramifications of that. On clinical research, for example, they're going to say, we're not going to pay you that much anymore.
And these budgets are good, y'all.
Those budgets are going. If they say that we just can't pay because we're not making that much money anymore. You know what the average salary of a doctor is? Yeah. Do you know
that would not make clinical research great again?
Like, do you know what the average salary of doctors and stuff is? And if people are listening,
like $300K.
No, it's something like 40 or 50,000. You can look at
in the U.S.
No, I'm talking about in let's say France for argument's sake.
Okay.
So just what is the average? And you can type it in as well.
3D
Salary of a
says, do you
doctor.
think Australia will be able to get more studies in all of this?
So
Possibly.
in the UK.
What Darshan's saying is if what really matters is Trump's drug pricing plan.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the big thing. Here we go. GP, which is general practitioner doctors.
Wait, am I putting this on stage?
Oh, give me a second. I can do that for you. Give me a second.
So, if we use Trump's previous actions as a barometer, this will be a disaster as well.
Yeah, so this is... Can you see that?
Yes.
So GP salaries, that's your regular doctor, makes between $70,000 to $100,000.
100,000 pounds.
Pounds. So yeah. Specialists are you making like 63,000.
And what about in the US?
Okay.
What does this have to do with anything?
Well,
200. Oh, I told you 300. I'm right. Look, guys.
What is fair market value? In the end,
no one uses fair market value.
No. My point being, if you start paying someone when your average, if you're saying that I have to charge you less, that's how we're going to make all of our money back. Everyone gets paid less.
I see.
Huh. And yeah, so essentially, you're at least taking a 1/5 pay cut.
What makes our market the best? And Trump's thinking out loud now. Trump's.
Yeah. You want to stop sharing so I can look at your face?
Yeah. Trump's. If I game theory this out a little, because half of this show is just us game theorying what we think, and the first half is like some of our opinions.
Yeah.
If I game theory this out, it costs the most to do studies in the U.S. so far, by far. Maybe Europe's catching up slowly, but
by far it's in the U.S. Yeah, without a doubt. Okay,
and then it's also the biggest market.
Yeah,
because we're the sickest, most chronically ill.
Yeah, absolutely.
All that good stuff that RFK is not qualified to talk about, right?
Yeah, generally.
Generally so. And Trump puts price control, because right now there's currently no price control, right? It's just free market economics, which is what I would prefer as a libertarian.
Yeah.
In case people haven't figured out. If he puts price control on the drugs sold here, there is no further incentive to sell to the United States.
No, there'll be incentive. It's just you won't be a priority is the difference.
What becomes the priority? Who?
So here's what it is.
Will be the priority.
So I think here's the way I see it. If you are, I think a price control is excellent, right? So right now, if I have a choice between spending money and buying into Manhattan without rent control, or buying into Inglewood, without a doubt, I'm going to buy Manhattan because it's going to grow. The moment you say all you get are price controls everywhere. Well, fine. Does it really matter? No, I don't care where I buy the product, buy the house anymore. So
you just buy at random.
Yeah, exactly. So the priority we get is lost.
And the emphasis on enrolling minority participants because the drugs work differently and in different.
Again, remember the money's gone. So now you decide.
Yeah, I'm playing it out. I'm playing out like, is that valuable anymore? You know, because most of those underserved.
Valuable. The data is valuable. Without a doubt, the data is valuable.
The data is valuable.
But the question is, the money may not support it anymore.
And in these underserved areas, which are virtually the majority of them are.
You might start seeing exploitation as a result, if anything.
Like what, fake drugs or.
Well, you see people who say, "I'll do it for you." Yeah, you know what? You want to pay me instead of the 100,000 you want to pay me, you're now going to pay me 10,000. Okay, I'll do it for you. Now you're gonna either fake the data, or you're going to not fake the data, but really exploit the patients. Like you've got to compromise somewhere.
You think he'll come out with price controls? Like, what's the over under on that?
Pretty high.
Isn't the devil in the details though? Like, I predict the market overreacts, and then he kind of just like the China thing.
No, but I think that's
market overreact. Then he's back to like normal kind of normal.
If I remember correctly.
Right. But we're far removed from like 250.
Yeah, but again, I'm not sure 250% is that much better, anyways. I don't. I don't think that price controls. I think price controls are going to happen because I think the price of drugs has gotten ridiculous.
I would have
I'm not even.
expected that from the Democrats.
I don't care who it is. To me, price of drugs is high. Like, let's agree
Right.
that price of
Right.
drugs is high. If that's true, the fact is that someone's got to control it. And if that's true, how do you control it? I think he's got a fair argument. One of the arguments I've heard is he's saying, I'm going to look at 5 different countries. I don't know what those countries are, but we're going to price match to those. So Medicare already has what's called most favored nation status. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay. Which is, for those people who don't know, essentially they look at private payers and they look at other people and they go, whoever's getting the best deal, we want that deal.
Right.
And essentially the question becomes, he's saying what, and again, we haven't had this officially said yet, but what I've read is suggesting that he's going to say, why stop it in the US? Most favored nation status globally. So if anyone's giving you a better price, you've got to, like, within certain states, within certain countries, we want to match that.
Correct.
And that's a totally reasonable position to take. But
so how much of that arbitrage that's there, basically, how much do we not affect the gross?
Well, I'll give you a really simple comparison. Let's say GLP-1s. The US charges $1,500 right now, right? About plus or minus for a month's supply.
Right.
Do you know what India charges?
I don't know India, but I know in Denmark it's like $40 or something.
India is 50.
Right.
So my point being, if that becomes your new standard, forget any more GLP research. They're done. No one's spending that money anymore.
Right. And it's strictly all because the US, we pay for it.
Absolutely.
So how much of that do you think that arbitrage, let's take it, between $1,550 and $50.
Yeah.
So $1,500 of a delta.
Yeah.
How much of that is directly responsible or due to the PBMs?
Oh no, that is list price. That's not PBM price.
So how much of that arbitrages the PBMs are at fault for being?
Well, I think the PBMs have a lot of blame. Let's be clear. I think everyone shares blame in this. I think industry shares blame. I think PBMs share blame. I think doctors share blame. We all have to take a responsibility in this. PBMs are not scot-free, without a doubt, but I don't think we are either.
We being
industry or healthcare practitioners, all of them. I say that on both sides.
So anyone in healthcare needs to take a pay cut?
We'll all have to take pay cuts. How else are we going to do this? I don't know.
I don't know. And he's saying no taxes either.
Yeah, exactly. So some.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's always like hesitation. So, but we have to look at the big pharmacies, then middlemen. My daughter takes a med that's not covered at Osco CVS. It's $300 a month. Brand name drug at mom and pop pharmacy, $17.
Yeah.
So that's not anything to do with clinical researchers.
No. I think the point she's making is that pharmacies are also taking a big chunk and they have to blame. I think that's an easy fix though, because you can just do a price compare on that and just go like, here's the.
Yeah.
I do that. I've started doing that with some of the drugs I'm getting.
With good RX, no? With the good RX.
You could do good RX. I just literally went to Cost Plus Drugs and got mine.
Mark Cuban's?
Mark Cuban's.
You love that thing.
No, I would say I'd compare it to Mark Cuban, Amazon, what my insurance company would charge. And like I being my girlfriend, did the comparison. And she's like, this is what lands up being your best option. So that's what we went with.
You like Mark Cuban?
I don't give a shit about any of them. I just cared what my drugs cost.
No, I know. Separate from that, though, you like what he's doing with that? Do you think
I think being disruptive is a good thing. I think he's causing everyone to reassess where we are. So he's caused PBMs to reassess their programs. So
I'm just trying to think how much of this arbitrage is like if you remove PBMs.
Yeah.
How much of a difference that actually makes? Because the net to the drug companies, if the net stays the same, really everything's going to stay the same. You just remove.
If the net stays the same, absolutely. But the question is, will the net stay the same? Because let's be clear, PBMs serve a very, very valuable function. They're not just evil people.
Yeah, they are.
I've worked in PBMs as well, and I know what.
All right, defend them. What do they do that's good?
Okay, so I have worked in if you ever work with doctors, and you'll see this all the time, where doctors just go, "Here's the latest drug. I don't even know what it really does, but I had a cute drug rep come in and order this drug. We're gonna give it to you."
They don't say that, man.
Happened all the time.
Wow.
What happens all the time? Now, why do you think drug reps are pretty? It's not because
I'm not going to comment because some of them watch, but let's just say not all of them are.
That's fair, but I think overall, that's what well, we have very different experiences. And
back in the day, yes. Back in the day, yes.
The point I'm making is they got access, and then they were able to convince doctors to prescribe. The result of that was sorry, I'm trying to get my thoughts straight because Preeti has another question we can get into in a second. But I think that if we land up in a scenario where pharmacies are, sorry, you asked me to defend PBM. That was the question.
Yeah.
So what PBMs say is, generally speaking, you've got a tier of options, right? So you've got, let's say I am itching, or let's say I'm puking. What is causing the puking? You're going to try to go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. What everyone wants to do is write for step 5 all the time, because it's just easier. You're not going to come back. You're going to make my life easier as the doctor, as a prescriber. Happened all the time. The PBM wouldn't go. The PBM would routinely say, you need to go through a stepwise process. So that's what PBMs are supposed to be doing: controlled access to the drugs, so that you're actually meeting the needs. Now, do they do it in the most ass backwards way? Absolutely. It took me 4 months to get access to a drug that they had all the information for. They agreed that I would need it if I could prove it. I gave them everything, and they still didn't give me access. So I'm not here saying PBMs are.
Was that due to incompetence or greed?
I think it's structured incompetence. Their systems didn't talk to each other.
On purpose?
The first time I'd go, maybe I have to just call them and take care of it. When you're making that call every day for 4 weeks straight, I'm not sure it's problematic.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Helen says, "Yep, I always said the reps are the pretty ones, not necessarily the smart." You bad, Helen. You bad.
Yeah.
There's some very smart reps that come to our offices. Keep the Starbucks coming, guys. Nitro cold brew. Darshan, is that legal for reps to bring coffee? Pharma reps to bring Starbucks to the offices?
Yeah, that's de minimis.
Okay. What about a Subway sandwich?
It's still de minimis. At a certain point, it gets past that.
Let's say you go to Red Robin now. You start getting to a place where...
But I think that's really what it ends up being. I think these are the questions people are always asking. So when it gets past a certain number.
Yeah. I don't know what we accomplish on this pod, but you got to watch that hour-long podcast with Megan Kelly.
I think I might have to, because I think it's good to know where he is.
This guy is freaking important, whether we like him or not.
Which is why I'm
I think to me, he talks very sensibly.
It could be. Could very
Trump's price cuts. You're right on that greater point. Yeah. That's really the big picture thinking we got to be looking at, and I don't think anyone's really talking about it. Yeah. And that's something that everyone can agree with. Like, yeah, man, we're all overpaying for drugs, but then the solution is what, and then do we no longer become, since we're the best paying nation, the benefit is we get access to the newest things first. If that goes away, we're like, we'd have to go travel somewhere to go get the latest meds because we don't get them here. So yeah. I think access to care is important. And who's that going to benefit? It's not going to benefit the underserved. They're not going to travel. It's going to benefit the rich. Probably more so.
No, I think that there's a whole other process happening. So they're looking at things like drug reimportation and stuff. But the point is that it won't even be a question because you already get the best price.
Our medical tourism might go up.
No, but you're not going to have that problem because they're just going to say, this is what we're paying. Deal with it.
And so you're going to get those manufacturers can say, no, we don't want to.
No, but they will because you're going to get the same price anywhere, right? So now you're in a rent control district. Everyone's got the same rent.
And then now you just have high volume.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Man, these are good. Anything else you missed that you want to discuss, or
No, I think I
how
already
do you
have.
really feel about RFK? We're still not sure.
Again, I don't have a problem with him as a person. I think I just don't think he's qualified right now, and maybe he will be at a certain point. Maybe he will be, but to me, I don't trust anyone who comes in without knowledge and changes the world. That's the same problem I have with Musk. Like in the end, come in saying I'm just going to remove people and then see what happens. And if I made a oopsie, then we'll fix that. No, you can't do that. There's a reason people quit, and I think the repercussions of what just happened are probably never going to go away. And what I mean by that is,
you mean the NIH?
No, I mean in general. I'll tell you what I mean. NIH is just one of them, but I was talking purely government employees. The fact is that government employees took a huge pay cut to work as government employees because you get experience and you get guarantee for life, a job guaranteed for life. You've basically taken away that guarantee because now the truth is, now that that job can be taken away. In that specific, Helen, I have a different point with Helen's comment, but
Helen's feisty.
So to me, I think the idea that we're now going to see people go, you know what, you're not guaranteeing me a job for life. Why am I going to take the risk of coming to you? So it's really now going to depend on, can you give me experience that I couldn't get somewhere else? And is it worth it? Is the industry going to pay me so much more for that? Because there are people who joined because they truly thought they're going to change the world. And you're going to have time to do that. Now you're just saying, no, we're not offering you that option.
Preeti, we got you. What would be impact on world clinical trials market of price cut?
I think overall that price the market would drop. I don't think it would. It'd be a couple of different options, right? One would be in the US, obviously they're going to make less money and they're going to pay less money. They're going to then have to decide whether they're going to continue to pay the same prices in the rest of the world, or they're going to go, you know what, I don't have to. Because the question is, why would I do a study in Canada or in Australia? It's not cheaper anymore. I might as well just do the study in the US.
So is there a world where the US can have more trials, maybe?
Yeah, it's possible.
At the same budgets?
Yeah, because you're now flattening the cost, right?
So the fear porn is resolved. There is a world where there's more studies, same budgets.
Do you want to do 50 studies to get the same amount of money? Because that's what you'd be looking at.
Oh, no, I said same budget.
No, not
same budget per trial.
Same budget as everyone else, not same budget as we had before.
Hey, the answer is no, but if I had to, guess what, Katie and Lana and Grecia? Yep, we're doing 50 studies this year. We got to do it. Probably get a bunch of interns.
Who knows? So, yeah.
Oh, man. Well,
the dynamics change completely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for making me depressed for the rest of the week. So
why?
I appreciate that.
Wait, maybe luckily the rest of the week is tomorrow, so you'll be fine.
I think we'll be all right. I think ultimately, well, if you look at Trump's execution on the tariffs, now we're only 4 weeks into it, or
is that
less,
all it is?
Like 2.
Yeah. I mean,
the jury's still out on the outcome.
25%.
Today,
yeah.
Ray Dalio wrote a very good article today on how that U.S.-China relationship is actually going to get figured out soon and how it's going to benefit everyone. So maybe there's just going to be a lot of drama, and then things will just be the same, but with increased pricing power for the American consumer.
There's too much unknowns right now.
Yeah.
Because everything you knew and took as sacred is fair game to be changed right now. And that's the struggle. That's why the market sort of collapsed, because no one really knows what does tomorrow look like. So far we know you can't really import drugs. No one's really taking your drugs. I said drugs. Ignore drugs for a second. You can't really export materials or import materials in a global supply chain because you don't know what you're going to have to pay.
Well, the pharma, I know this is anecdotal, and I know you got to go.
Yeah.
But the pharma must be pretty confident about what's going to happen
Why is
because
that?
I've never seen as many studies as we're getting right now.
Or they're trying to. I don't have any answer for that. We'll find out.
I don't either, but I do have a comparison. In 2008, it wasn't like this. That
No,
Fear Fest started, every trial got halted, and I'm seeing
maybe.
not to be the case. Matter of fact, they're starting more trials, so something's different this time.
Okay,
Same but different.
maybe.
I don't know. Just trying to find some silver lining. All right, man. Everybody go follow Darshan. Listen, we got to get him to 20,000 subscribers.
20,000. That's what we're looking for.
What are you at right now? I didn't even look.
I think it's like
13?
10, 15, something like that. It's
Okay.
probably 10, closer to 10.
So we're not that far, guys. Come
Yeah.
on. Do it. Do it. Everybody go follow Darshan right now.
That's right.
Pretty, join the club, all right? And you've got like 50 years to go until you retire, so stop complaining. Bye-bye.